If you want to know how to rank through your foundation job preferences relatively stress-free, keep watching. Hi everyone, my name's Sarah. I'm a junior doctor working near London, and in this video we're going to go through everything that you need to know so that you can rank through your deaneries and job preferences for the foundation program application course. I've broken down this video into 5 different parts. Feel free to skip to whatever you find more beneficial. The first part is going to be just the structure and talking about what the foundation program application actually is. The second part of the video is going to be about understanding how to rank and some key facts that you really do need to know. The third one, we're going to be talking about everything that you need to consider while you're ranking, and then we'll talk about the strategies that you can use while you're applying to make sure that it's the best decision for you. And I'll talk through how I practically went through ranking each of those jobs when I applied as well last year. And finally, I'll be mentioning some resources that you can use that I found really helpful and I think will make your journey a lot easier along the way. Now, the UK Foundation Programme is how you get your first 2 years of jobs in the UK, so the foundation year 1 and 2. And your total score is made up of 50%, which is the EPM, and 50%, which is the SJT. So the EPM is your score that you get in medical school, and on top of that, any additional degrees and publications that you've done. And the SJT, as you'll know, is a situational judgment test, which you won't have done by the time you're applying for the foundation program application course. You apply through L'Oreal to different foundation schools, and these are groups of hospitals where you will be doing all your placements. There's 20 different schools grouped together by geographical location, and the GMC standardizes the different schools so that everybody receives pretty much the same training and the same opportunities by the end of their first 2 years of foundation program training. The first thing you need to remember is that you will only have your EPM score at this point. That means that half of your marks are not going to be determined yet, and you can't predict what you're going to get in the SJT. If you want some advice about how to do well in the SJT and you haven't done it already, I've made 2 videos about all the strategies that I used and how you can score really highly in that exam. But the point is, you're not going to have half your score, and that makes people start thinking about a guessing game and trying to figure out the algorithm to get the highest possible ranking of their deaneries. What I would advise is just pick your preferences. Pick where you really would want to apply to, no matter what your SJT score is, so that if you score really low or really high, you've ranked everything in accordance to where you actually want to go, rather than trying to figure out a really fancy way to bypass the algorithm. The way that the algorithm works is that if you apply for, let's say, the South Thames deanery and you do really well in your SJT, then you have a high chance of getting that. And if you don't do as well in your SJT and you don't get your first choice, they put you automatically in consideration for your second choice. And it's not like the second choice will know that you actually applied for something else above that and that was actually your second choice. You'll be considered as a primary choice for that second section. And then if you don't get that, then it will go to the next one, and you're considered equally for each of those preferences. Okay, so don't try and be smart about it, just apply for what you actually want to get, and that's the closest way that you can actually get what you want. Another thing you need to consider is that you're ranking deaneries and not actually cities. So you may be mistaken into thinking that you can apply for a specific city in Scotland, for example, and you really want to spend 2 years of your foundation program in Edinburgh, but that's often not going to be the case. So if you apply for the Scotland deanery, Scotland is very big, so you might end up in a tiny city somewhere where you'd not expect it. So keep that in mind when you're applying. The bigger the deanery, the more chances, of course, depending on how highly you rank, the more chances you have of being sent to a very far location, or maybe to have to commute for the first 2 years. So being in one city in the first year and then moving to Edinburgh, for example, in the second year. So keep that in mind. So generally, in a smaller deanery, you'll have to move around less, and there's a higher chance of you to be able to control what type of city you want to end up in. And remember, once you've applied on L'Oreal, you can always change your mind until the deadline. It's not like as soon as you've submitted it, you can't change it anymore. And I think that's really helpful to know, so that you can do a rough draft of really your gut feeling and where you think you want to go. And over time, when you do more research, if you decide that you want to change your mind and re-rank something, you can absolutely do that. Once you've been ranked to a deanery, you will then have to pick preferences for a whole list of jobs in different locations with different job combinations. So that's the second part, and we'll be talking about the strategy as well for that. Now let's talk about what to consider when you're applying. The main debate usually is between location and the different placements that are on offer. You can apply to any deaneries in England, Scotland and Ireland, and I think it's really important to first consider what your attachments are. So do you want to be near family? Are you held down in a certain area for personal reasons, or even a religious attachment like being next to a mosque or being near a religious circle that you have? all those things really matter, because if you decide that you want to go to Wales or to Scotland, but you have a really close attachment in London, for example, that makes it really tough for you, and think that it's going to be for the next 2 years of your life. In terms of location, you also want to consider whether you want to be in a big city, or if you don't mind being in a smaller rural area with more nature that's surrounding it. Another big factor to consider is cost. The salary can range in different deaneries and different locations in the UK, and if you live in London or near London, you get a slightly higher salary. However, they're generally pretty much equal, so it's going to be more about cost rather than how much you're gaining in terms of your salary. And the different costs that can really add up are transport. So again, if you're in London with public transport versus if you're in another deanery and you're having to travel really far, the cost of getting a car if you don't have one, and how much that's going to cost every day going back and forth. And you also want to be thinking about the cost of living. So obviously in big cities it's going to be much more expensive, so that's something to take into account. And over time, over 2 years, those costs can really add up, so you want to really think about how important certain things are for you. Other things that are really important to consider are, for example, how close you want to be to an airport. So for someone like me who has a lot of family abroad, it's very important for me to be able to travel to an airport very quickly, and that would necessitate that you be near a big city. You also want to look at the types of specialties that you're interested in and where those training posts are. Now, you'll pretty much be guaranteed that you'll find tertiary and district hospitals in every deanery, as well as all sorts of specialties all over the country. If there are specific specialty centres that you want to work in, for example like a specialist trauma centre in London, then definitely you need to take that into account when you're applying for posts. But as a general rule, you will pretty much find all specialties in most areas. Another thing that you may not have considered before is looking at the timing of the jobs in the timeline over the 2 years. Now that's really important if, for example, you absolutely want to trial a specialty rotation like obs and gynae before applying for your specialty training. The specialist training applications are halfway through the 2nd year, so around December time. And if you absolutely want to do a specific rotation before then, make sure it's in your F1 or the first half of your F2 year, because otherwise you'll have to apply without having experienced that, and depending on your plans, that can be a bit of a downer. Now we get to the exciting or maybe very stressful part for all of you, and that is the strategy of how to apply. So the number one tip I would give you is do what is good for you. Get your head out of the rat race mentality. I know in medical school we all tend to want to apply for the most competitive thing, thinking that it's the best thing for us, but your ideal situation for F1 and F2 may look entirely different to my ideal situation, and we can both be winners in different areas, in different specialties, in different foundation schools. So now that we've talked about the different things that you need to consider whilst applying, make a list of what's most important for you and stick to that when you're applying. So if you don't really care for being in a big city and you don't have any personal reasons or family keeping you in a certain place, there's no reason why you can't just spread your wings and try a completely different area in the UK. You will have wonderful training opportunities in every area, whether you're in Scotland or in London or in Wales. It's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking that less competitive areas won't be as great for your training, but actually all that means is you've got a higher chance of getting in and then picking exactly what city you want to be in and what jobs you want to have. So it's actually a genuinely good thing if it works for you. Remember that more competitive deaneries will have more competition and therefore less choice, and it will be harder to get what you want. So if you manage to get into London, for example, just because you think it's cool but you don't genuinely want to be in a big city, it will then be much more difficult for you to pick the specific specialty jobs that you want and to be in certain areas of London that you'd rather be in. So keep that in mind when you're applying, and picture what your idea of success is going to look like for the next 2 years. There is no such thing as a perfect deanery and a perfect set of jobs, but there is such a thing as a perfect combination for you and what you are looking for. And I know it's very difficult to have that mindset when you're surrounded by people who are always competing with each other, but just by being mindful of that, I think you're already a step ahead of the game, and you can hopefully pick what's right for you and not what everybody else thinks is the right thing to do. I strongly recommend that you have a criteria of your priorities. So we've gone through all the things that you need to consider. Now sit down and make a list of what matters for you and for your ideal next 2 years. So whether that be location or a specific specialty job that you absolutely want, or if you really want to be next to the coastline, whatever it may be, make a list of those and then rank them in order of importance for yourself. That way you've got a key so that when you're sifting through specific job applications, once you've been ranked into your deanery and you're looking at all the combinations of jobs in different hospitals and different cities, you can always go back to that list and remember what's most important for you, because it's so easy to get decision fatigue and completely forget what's important and just feel lost in the whole process. This is the one thing that kept me sane when I was sifting through hours and hours of job rotations. Practically, the way that I went through all the ranking of the job placements in different hospitals is by printing it. I'm a visual person, so it was really important for me to be able to see everything firsthand and then move them around and reorganize and reshuffle as I went along and as I made my decisions. Some of my friends found that it was enough for them to just use the Excel spreadsheet and rank through that way, but I found that it was really worth it to print off all the job combinations and cut them down into strips so that I could see them in front of me and then re-rank and allocate them. Find what works for you. I just didn't like to go through an Excel spreadsheet and not have a bird's eye view of everything, whereas where I printed it, I was able to see everything on a table and be able to easily reallocate based on my key of priorities that I had. My last strategic tip may be the most important one depending on your state of mind, and that is not to overthink it. It's very easy to spend days and days and days reshuffling and reallocating your preferences, trying to find the perfect combination. Like I said before, there is no such thing, and whatever you end up doing, even if you blindfold yourself and just randomly pick your combinations, I don't recommend that, but even if you did, you would still have a fantastic learning opportunity and have a good experience wherever you might find yourself in the next 2 years. And by saying that, I am very aware that some of you may end up somewhere you really didn't want to be in, and you may end up working with horrible people, but that in itself is a great learning opportunity, and you'll realize that a lot of medicine is just knowing how to deal with people and how to deal with difficult situations. So whatever situation you end up in, know that with the right mindset, it can be a fantastic opportunity for you, and you will have the chance to grow as a person from it. So don't overthink it, rank as best you can, and then leave it aside and focus on enjoying the rest of your medical school year. Last but not least, I wanted to talk about some helpful resources that you can use to help you throughout this difficult journey. So the number one website that I use was Messly. This is a fantastic website if you don't want to spend hours on Google researching every tiny little thing. It breaks down all the foundation schools, showing you each hospital and ranking them all in terms of facilities and all sorts of things. You also have reviews by F1 and F2s who have worked in those hospitals, telling you what the pros and cons are. So it's really helpful for hands-on advice. That's a really helpful resource, and I've also linked down below a helpful tool that can help you calculate your EPM score to see where you would rank in those different deaneries and to help you along the process. I wouldn't obsess over it because you don't know what you'll get in your SJT and anything can happen, but it gives you a good ballpark idea of where you could end up and what would work for you. Try and find honest and first-hand opinions as much as you can. So if you know anybody in the year above, or if you've got any friends who know of people working in different hospitals, try and reach out to them and see what their first-hand opinion is of the hospital or whatever specialty they're doing that you're looking into. Have a look on Facebook for different hospital groups where you can reach out to F1s who generally will be more than happy to give you some advice even if you don't know them. And that's your best shot at getting first-hand opinions of what it's really like to work in those hospitals. Like everything in life, too much of a good thing may be a bad thing, and in this case, too much information and too much searching can be a bad thing and just fry your brain. So once you've done some preliminary research, using the resources I've linked down below and speaking to as many people as you can, stop with that. Just start ranking the jobs, trust your gut feeling, and look at your criteria of priorities. That should be more than enough to help you go through this process. Don't cause yourself unnecessary suffering by spending too many hours trying to sift through the exact number of reviews for each hospital and how you can calculate the exact mileage between this and that. The perfect combo does not exist. A really helpful advice that I use a lot in my general day-to-day life and have to remind myself of is that perfection is the enemy of good. So once you've got a good amount of information about the different deaneries and the different jobs, that should be more than enough for you to make the right choices. Finally, I just want to leave you with this reminder that if you don't get the training post that you want, and if you don't end up in the ideal location of your dreams, it's okay. You're gonna have a fantastic time, you're gonna learn a lot, and even if it's a bad experience, it's gonna make you grow as a person. So at the end of the day, it's all good. You're gonna meet great people and have a great time no matter where you are. Remember, this is not the end of the line. Just like doing your A-levels, applying for medical school, doing your OSCEs, applying for the foundation program application course, all these things are processes that are never ending in your life. There's always going to be something else that you're applying to, and that is just the nature of medicine and life generally. So after the foundation program course, you're going to be applying maybe for your specialty training, and then you're going to be focusing on another process in your life. So the very essence of the career that you've chosen is filled with processes, and if you don't learn to enjoy these, or at least make them as manageable and as stress and pain-free as possible for you, it's going to be really tough in the long term. So try and put things into perspective and remember that this is just a tiny part of your journey. And the great news is, whatever decision you end up making, it will be a good one. So enjoy the process as best you can, and then finish that and enjoy some time with your family and friends. So I really hope that you found this helpful and that I've made this process a little less stressful for you. If you have any questions that I've not answered or would like some specific advice for your specific situation, feel free to comment down below and I will happily answer. Please like and subscribe to help the algorithm, and I will see you in the next video.